This playlist collects together and organizes the individual component modules, which together will comprise the first of 3 lectures covering the material from our first reading, that chapter on the scientific treatment of physical domains. This course, the text, and the lectures adopt a different structure and narrative arc than the standard Introduction to Cognitive Science text or course. We begin with an outline of how thinkers travel from proto-scientific views of a set of phenomena to a mature or normal science, a science in which scientists organize phenomenon into a domain of inquiry, within which one or more paradigmatic theoretical models serve to structure the domain and to provide explanatory schemas for predicting, retrodicting, manipulating, and explaining phenomenon. The chapter and the lectures illustrate the concepts and the transitions used to outline this progression, with a mix of historical episodes and contemporary examples. The outline I present in this current chapter and lectures is going to serve as a template through which later chapters and lectures chronicle the emergence of the philosophy of mind, empirical psychology, linguistics, neuroscience, and computer science, as well as their convergence upon the computational explanations of cognitive capacities that have come to form a core paradigmatic theoretical model for cognition in each of these disciplines. From there, the text and the lectures will shift to a more common approach to presenting contemporary findings and theories regarding specific cognitive capacities. Following this transition, the course and the text cover several contemporary topics: basic visual processing for objects, scenes, and motions, neurons and neuronal functioning, learning and memory from cellular mechanisms to the anatomy and function of specialized memory systems, concepts and categorizations, and human inference strategies and inference abilities, both native and learned. I adopt a narrative structure that emphasizes how science and scientists work, and that grounds the initial discussion of individual disciplines within cognitive science in their historical convergence upon computational paradigms, for several reasons. First, I want to emphasize that science is a creative and constructive process akin to normal cognition. Textbooks often create a sense that science operates in a fundamentally different manner from ordinary cognition. The view of science and scientific methods I offer in this text and lectures portrays science as employing the same basic tools and strategies found in everyday cognition. This text, this course, and these lectures portray science as differing in how it deploys these tools and strategies, specifically in the resources that it employs and has available to it, the time frame in which it operates, the precision with which it seeks to understand and predict the world, and the processes that it employs. Second, many Introduction to Cognitive Science textbooks and courses introduce methodological elements like operationalizations, so methods for categorizing elements of a domain, or instruments, things like microscopes, experimental designs, the manner in which theorists structure an experiment in order to isolate some feature of the phenomenon. They'll introduce these things in the context of that specific contemporary use in that specific research area. This undoubtedly helps students understand the experiments and the data, but it often fails to cultivate a more general understanding of how science and scientists approach formulating and testing theoretic models. Third, I want to emphasize how easily and how often our pre-theoretic understanding of a domain misleads us. Indeed, though people often suppose that they have a deep insight into how they think and act, instances in which our ordinary understanding of how we think and act mislead us, often misleading us dramatically, emerge as a common theme repeatedly throughout the text and the course. Fourth, since few students have a sophisticated knowledge of all of the various fields within cognitive science, historical introductions to a field provide a softer landing for the uninitiated. Fifth, historical introductions to individual disciplines often provide powerful illustrations of how interdisciplinary interactions fuel theorizing within a specific discipline. Finally, students often find computational explanations of cognition difficult to understand. By approaching computational explanations to their emergence in multiple disciplines, students can rehearse the basic ideas across a variety of disciplinary contexts. Having covered the larger methodological and structural issues relating to the content of this chapter, let's end this lecture module by circling back to this transition between proto-science or folk theory to mature science or normal science. We'll start by talking about how thinkers organize their understanding of the world through one or more ontological frameworks, how they begin to identify potential scientific domains by grouping together sets of phenomena within particular ontological frameworks. A transition to what we might think of as science starts to emerge with the emergence of a paradigmatic case, the formulation of a theoretical model that is capable of explaining some important part of this now identified scientific domain using the concepts and relationships of some specific ontological framework. From there, researchers then begin to create a paradigm, that is, to extend the initial insights of that paradigmatic case as far as possible to comprehend as much of the associated phenomenon within the central insight of that paradigmatic case as they possibly can. This will lead to the initial structuring of that scientific domain around that specific paradigm or collection of paradigms that has emerged. Normal science begins to emerge as scientists work to further articulate or alter that basic notion of the scientific domain by tinkering with, extending, elaborating upon those central paradigmatic theoretical models. In this lecture series, we'll look at concepts and categories, using that as a springboard through which to then talk about ontological frameworks, and we'll finish the lectures covering this material by then looking at that progression from ontological frameworks to normal science in our third lecture.